goal or intervention perhaps that we want to either eliminate or list it as inactive. For example, one of the interventions is to use a translator if any language barrier exists. We'll assume that this patient does not have language barriers, so I'd like to eliminate this from the patient's plan of care profile. By clicking on this intervention, I'll open that hyperlink. I can change the status now to erroneous, since it's not necessary for this patient. I can also include an add-on description or a narrative note describing no language barrier identified. We can click Save, and by returning back to the patient care management profile and scrolling down to the education care set, we'll notice that that has been eliminated from their profile. Again, as we review the education profile, it has been eliminated. Next, we'll individualize the Risk for Impaired Skin Integrity care set. So we'll select that hyperlink. Using the status prompts, we'll ensure that this is an active status problem. On admission, the patient was identified as having a stage 2 pressure ulcer. We'll keep the schedule as continuous until resolved, so that we're always assessing the patient for risk for skin integrity breakdown. Under certainty, we'll identify this as an actual problem. For this patient, this is chronic, as they were admitted with a stage 2. I can also add that in description, stage 2 pressure ulcer on admit, right hip. I can identify the related to decreased mobility. I can indicate the information provider whenever available. We'll just put spouse and significant other and then click Save. Note now that the comments that I placed in the add-on description field appear immediately below the care set. This is immediately viewable for anyone who logs into the patient care management's profile and views all care sets to identify how this has been individualized for the patient. Actual chronic stage 2 pressure ulcer on admit, right hip related to decreased mobility provided by spouse information or significant other is now viewable. Now that we've identified how to individualize care sets, let's continue with the admit process by including additional care sets associated with the patient's admit diagnoses or problems. Recall that we've currently added hospital standards as well as unit-specific standards for ICU. As we scroll down to the bottom, we can see that that care set has been listed. But the patient was also admitted with admit diagnoses that should have additional care sets established. For example, pneumonia, congestive heart failure, diabetes, pressure ulcer, and the use of restraints, as well as rule out CVA, are all important problems that should have the plan of care established as well as essential flow sheets attached. Again, returning back to Add Care Set, we'll locate those additional care sets and add them to our profile now before beginning our flow sheet documentation on this new admission. That way we'll be sure not to forget to do that later. Using the drop-down menu, we'll select all categories, and all categories of care sets will populate below. This is the easiest way I've found to locate my additional problem sets. I'll scroll down and start selecting my problem sets associated with my patient diagnoses. Diabetes, known. Heart failure. And note that heart failure should also have core measures attached to it. As we scroll down our shopping cart, we see the patient's plan of care items for outcomes and interventions, and immediately attached are also all heart failure core measure interventions. As we previously mentioned, using the Care Set Hyperlink tab provides this as one complete set. Using the individual Find Problems tab would only pull the heart failure core measure care set title, and you would have to then search for the individual interventions one at a time, adding them into your shopping cart and building them into your care set. Again, a much more labor-intensive process, and also opens the opportunity for missing some of those items. So as a reminder, always go to the Add a Care Set tab when searching for additional problems to place into your shopping cart. Okay, let's continue down. We have impaired skin integrity. We have pneumonia, pressure ulcer, restraints, stroke. At this point, I'll just go ahead and review my selections in my main field prior to saving. Now you can see all of those care set specific problems are populated into my patient profile review field. I have the ability, once again, to open my schedule and individualize my schedule, as well as, by selecting my tree, opening the individual care sets and changing the status or adding individualized information at this time. I can also simply save it to my patient care profile and then go back to my patient care profile screen and do it at that time in another field. We'll go ahead and save it now for demonstration purposes and time. Now we can see that all of those problems have been populated into our patient care management profile. Using the bar to the right, we can scroll down and view our diabetes problem, as well as our heart failure and core measures, skin integrity, pneumonia, scrolling down, safety, restraints, stroke, as well as our unit-specific standards are all listed below. Again, to view the individual outcomes and interventions associated with each care set, it's necessary to click the plus symbol either at the top of the field or next to each care set to open that care set and view the outcomes and interventions attached. Let's briefly take a look at some of the outcomes and interventions associated with some of our care sets, in particular our core measures. As we scroll down, beginning with diabetes, we can see that the interventions are very similar to most interventions that you're currently providing for your diabetic patients. For example, reviewing of the insulin order set. Recall that you can individualize this particular intervention by clicking on the intervention, opening the field, and specifying individual physician orders or nursing care interventions for that patient. For example, we'll keep this as active. We'll add on description. Patient placed on mild SIOS, subcutaneous insulin order set, on admit. And then click Save. Note the description now appears immediately below the intervention, patient placed on mild SIOS order set on admission. Again, associated flow sheets automatically attach to the problem sets for documentation. Scrolling down, we can open the core measure as well as the heart failure plan of care by clicking the plus symbol. We can review each of the interventions, and we can eliminate interventions by changing the status to erroneous if they don't apply to our patient, or we can change them to pending or inactive depending on the needs. Let's individualize this patient's outcome for daily weights. For example, daily weight notify physician of increased weight gain. We can individualize it to the patient by clicking on the hyperlink and assuming the patient has an order for notify physician if weight gain greater than 5 pounds. We'll simply add that as active, add on description, notify MD for weight gain